Hello all, and welcome to the 2019-2020 Winter Outlook first edition of what will be 3 editions here at US Weather Action in the upcoming weeks and months. So let's just jump right into it with the forecast fundamentals. We should make this quick, and then we will jump into the temperature outlook, precipitation outlook, snowfall outlook, and overall outlook. So as many of you probably know, we will be seeing a warm neutral phase this upcoming winter. That's what's looking likely. It's looking less and less likely that we will get to that weak El Nino status just because of all the cooling that's been going on in the central and eastern portions of the ENSO region. So next we like to look at temperature analogs. This is matching current SSTs, that is sea surface temperatures, with past SSTs, and then seeing how the following winters performed. So we see this core of below average temperatures in the eastern Great Lakes and Northeast, but in general, the entire East, had below average temperatures, but that's just where the core was. And then the core of the warmth was in the Rocky Mountains and western U.S. Precipitation analogs, the southwestern U.S. and the Appalachian Mountains both saw above average precip, with the central U.S. and the northwestern U.S., Cascades, seeing below average precipitation. Our analog upper air setup, blocking or not. So last year what we saw was a zonal flow pretty often, which resulted in the lack of these big storms along the coast, and we just really didn't see many large storms in New England, the Northeast. There just wasn't that activity due to that zonal flow. So right off the bat, you can see that this does not suggest that there's going to be much of a zonal flow. You see a negative NAO signaled by this area of troughing in the eastern U.S. and also Europe, or Western Europe, that is, and then a positive PNA in the west. There's other teleconnections to go into it, but this is just what we're looking at for now. And then you can see Greenland blocking around Greenland. This is high pressure, so this is what typically helps out with that generation of massive storms along the East Coast. Now, what's important to note is that by no means am I saying the NAO or the AO or the PNA is going to be one phase the entire winter. That's just not what you see. And when you go back in history, you can see that it typically fluctuates every month. Possibly it'll stay consistent for 2 months. Sometimes it'll be half of a month. But, if you hear that the winter is going to be entirely a negative NAO or positive PNA, that's just not true. That's just not what's going to happen. There's a 0.01% chance that it will happen, but it's just not likely. We will see fluctuations, but this is just what analogs are showing and what may be common this upcoming winter. So does this make sense? So when we look at a typical neutral winter pattern, so we typically see this polar jet stream going down into the eastern U.S. and then below average temperatures in that area, with above average temperatures in the southern U.S. and then wet conditions in the southeast from the subtropical jet stream feeding moisture into the south central U.S. Gulf Coast, and then it goes up the coast sometimes, and that's when you see those larger storms in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And most of those regions that I just named, mid-Atlantic and Northeast, on average see their best winters, and that is above average snowfall in neutral phase ENSO, in the neutral phase ENSO. So this is a good phase if you are a snow lover in that region. Not always does it happen that way, but most of the time, or at least more often than not, it does unfold like that. So let's look at current sea surface temperatures just real quick. You can see that neutral ENSO real quick, and the neutral PDO. We have been thinking that sometimes it generates a ridge along the west, but that's just not always the case. Like we saw last winter, we saw this, blazing hot Pacific, but there just really wasn't too much ridging as a result of that. And other teleconnections pretty much dominated. So, current versus analog sea surface temperatures in September. You can see that there is a pretty good match. So, we are well on our way as far as analogs, just because, you see this west central based weak El Nino, it's more of a warm neutral phase than a weak El Nino. When you look down here, around 0.4 degrees above average, so that's a warm neutral phase. And then you see this torching Pacific, which is what we see right now. So let's look at analog sea surface temperatures December to March. So you see the Pacific is warm in our analogs, just as we see right now, with this west and central based, warm neutral phase, and then the Atlantic's pretty much, kind of a mess, which is what we're seeing right now. So our recent temperatures and precipitation, what I do like to do is look at the past 10 years winters and see how they kind of unfolded, and then see how, this may impact this upcoming winter, because analogs are important, but trends are also just as important. So let's look at recent temperatures and precip. I did leave out 15-16, just because that was a Super Nino, and that really probably is not what we're going to be seeing this upcoming winter. So the core of the below average temperatures in the past 10 years has been in the North Central Plains and the Great Lake regions, with below average or above average temperatures in the southern U.S. Precipitation-wise, we've seen above average precipitation in the Appalachian Mountains and below average precip in California, South Central U.S., and Florida. So let's look at the forecast foundation key takeaways. So we see a west-based warm neutral ensophase is likely. Analogs suggest core of cold over Great Lakes in Northeast. More Greenland blocking equals bigger storms possible when we looked at that 500 millibar map. And then above average precipitation on the analogs in the mid-Atlantic and southwest U.S. So without further ado, let's get into the temperature outlook. So we will start in the southwest U.S., where you see this core of warmth. This is our above average temperature region for now, where we are seeing that likely to unfold. So it should be relatively noticeable in these areas that it is in fact a warmer winter than normal. We're not expecting anything record-breaking like you may see with the Super Nino, but it should be a relatively above-average temperature year in this region. And then extending all the way into the Great Plains, we see slightly above-average temperatures, likely again this winter, and then below-average temperatures in the eastern or actually western Great Lakes. This is slightly below-average temperatures, and then down into the Mid-Atlantic, central Mid-Atlantic. By the way, this area in between is just normal, if you're wondering. And then our core of below-average temperatures in Pennsylvania, New York, southern New England, northern New England, and then I guess Maine, which is part of New England. So that's where we're seeing things unfold right now. Like I said, we will have updates to this in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to subscribe. We will also have other videos pertaining to this upcoming winter, so it's definitely worth hitting that subscribe button for future updates if this type of content is what you are interested in. So now let's get into our precipitation outlook. We see a below average temperatures in the northwestern U.S. likely. This is what we saw in our analogs, very strong signal, and what we see unfolding this winter probably. And also below average precipitation in the central U.S. From Oklahoma City to just north of St. Louis, western Illinois, and then slightly below average precipitation in Chicago, and then over into extreme northern Texas, with our areas of above average precipitation in the southwestern U.S., and then that's slightly above, and then our core area of above average precipitation from northern Alabama, heading up the Appalachians into southern New York. So you can imagine our, this is an exciting map, I would imagine, and our snowfall outlook looks pretty similar to our precipitation outlook, just because they tend to be, hand in hand. Sometimes it's not always like that, but let's just jump right into it. So we see our core of below average snowfall, unfortunately again, in the northwestern U.S. and the central U.S. from Oklahoma City up into central Missouri, with above average snowfall possible in Southern California. Yes, Los Angeles, we do not expect to see big snowstorms, but there are in fact mountains in this region, the southern Sierra Nevada mountains. So also you see that heading into Arizona, you see Flagstaff, they tend to do good in the winter. So we're seeing 25% above average snowfall in these regions, and then 25% above average in this blue region in this from Maine to western PA, down the Appalachians, and then into central Virginia, with our 50% above average snowfall possible at this point in southern New England, into Pennsylvania, western Virginia, and eastern West Virginia. So, this is what we're looking at for this upcoming winter. It will change. I'd imagine some of you probably hope it won't change, but there probably will be changes. So, once again, be sure to subscribe and, just to be sure to receive those future updates as we get close to the winter. The certainty in this forecast will increase. So, now let's look at the overall outlook for this upcoming winter. First of all, we'll start with where most of you probably live, or maybe not most, or where the highest percentage in this area. So frequent storms possible. So this is where we see the most activity in the form of snowstorms and winter storms unfolding in this area. Northwest of I-95 should be on the snowy side of most storms. Now, there will definitely be storms that cut, into the Midwest or cut up the Appalachians, and these areas see rain. But once we get in towards the middle and later portions of the winter, don't be surprised if you see, storm after storm in this area. Some will be small, some will be big, but this is, what will produce that above average snowfall, or what we think at this point, I don't want to say it's certain just because this long range forecasting is just pretty difficult, but, this is what we think, is likely at this point, or at least possible, So north of this area, we have winter's freezer. This is our core of below average temperatures as seen earlier. And also, we think lake effect will be about average with, perhaps Erie and Cleveland possibly slightly below average, just because if Erie freezes over, earlier than normal, then, the lake effect snow machine is going to shut off earlier than normal. And that's what pretty much they rely on for the majority of their average snowfall. To the west, we see this area of cold. Yes, you will probably see around average snowfall, and it will be relatively cold. So, what else can you say besides cold? To the south of that region, this is in most of the mid-Atlantic, and also in the just west of the Appalachians in Kentucky and Tennessee. This is our wintry mixed zone. So, this is where typically we see our winter battle zone of, sometimes it's going to be rain, sometimes it's going to be wintry mix, sometimes probably rarely it's going to be all snow, but this is where we see our wintry mix zone. It's really going to be a mess. This is typical, for Virginia and Kentucky and North Carolina, but this is where we see that sometimes it's further north, if you're seeing more above average temperatures, but this is where we see it, lying this upcoming winter. So, working our way south, we see cool and wet conditions likely in the southeast from Atlanta to Columbia, Raleigh into, Charlotte into Raleigh. This is where we see cool and wet. They don't typically see too much snow, so, don't be surprised if you do see a few snow events in these areas, but it will probably be relatively minor, and for the most part, it's just going to be cool and rainy, unfortunately for you snow lovers down here. Probably a bit, rainy, what can you really expect, But, to the south of there, we have typical winter, in quotes, conditions. So, in other words, expect highs from the 50s to the 70s. You might want to break out those heavy winter coats down in Florida. It's going to be pretty freezing cold winter. No, it's going to be the typical winter. It's going to be a typical, it's going to be the typical, winter, in quotes, as I said. Just not too much of winter. At least what we consider winter up here in the north, but it's just the way it is down there. Mild conditions down most of Texas, as we saw in the temperature outlook, with about average precip. Then we have our less active region. This is our boring region. In the Central Plains, this is a result of below average precipitation, and around average temperatures. So we don't see too many systems working their way through this region, too often this upcoming winter. So we expect this area to be relatively dry, thus less active. So, cold and less snow likely from St. Louis to Chicago, much of Michigan and Wisconsin. So, this was our area near the core of our below average temperatures. It was over here, but, parts of Michigan and Indiana are in it. But we're also seeing slightly less snowfall than average just due to, the dryness that is at this point expected in the Midwest. Up here, we have our occasional clippers and blizzards in our northern plain regions. So, this is the heart of blizzards you know, where we typically see blizzards. You know, many people want to think that, oh, we have some blizzards on the East Coast. You know, they see, you know, 4 or 5 blizzards on average in the northern plains. Sometimes it's not just, you know, these 12-inch events. Sometimes it's 3-inch events. But when you have 40-mile-an-hour winds, it's just all about the winds. So occasional clippers and blizzards. You're going to have those Alberta clippers coming down from Canada, going into northern plains, Midwest, Northeast. And then we'll have those occasional blizzards. But around average precipitation and around average temperatures in this area. Well, actually, slightly below average temperatures, that was, I believe, for Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then in the Denver area up to Cheyenne, kind of the usual in that sense that we're going to have above, that is, average temperatures and precipitation. So you will have your early season and also late season events in Denver and Cheyenne that get you all excited for the winter and, you know, those early season events. But it's just going to be the usual, I'd say, for much of the west here, Denver and Cheyenne. So let's look at the Southern California region, Southern Arizona. This is our moist area, in that we do expect slightly above average precipitation, which should have good, you know, good implications on next year's wildfire season. So, but we do see slightly above average precipitation and temperatures in this area. In the Southern Rockies, or I guess Central and Southern Rockies, we have our average mountain snow, and then Northern Rockies, we have less mountain snow than normal. You know, you will see probably, you know, a few 100 inches, but just probably slightly below average, compared to normal. You know, for that amount, this seems like, you know, a winter wonderland out here in the east, but that's just what they typically see up there. And then warm and dry in the west, you know. I feel like this is just what all winter Alex, all these forecasts up here in the northwest. But I'm more confident in that dry. You know, there is the chance that we will see average temperatures up here. That's something that we'll have to watch and possibly change in the next few editions of our winter outlook, but that's just what we're expecting for now. So that has been the first edition of our 2019-2020 winter outlook here on U.S. Weather Action. Like I said, we will have 2 more outlooks here on this channel, and we will also have weekly and monthly forecasts, as well as we will break the winter down on a monthly basis. So, you know, if you're interested in seeing if you're going to have a nice Christmas time with above average snowfall or below average, like unfortunately what we've been seeing in the past few years, definitely stay tuned for those videos and be sure to subscribe for future updates.